Good evening, my lovelies, and welcome. I'm Lady McCreepster. Due to so many requests, I thought we'd go and visit the Good Shade Hotel again. I hear they have just hired a new employee. So come, lean in closer, and we'll begin. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Happy, maybe? Or dead? It's a question I've been asked a lot, and I have never been quite sure how to answer it. There are things I want to do. There is so much of life I haven't experienced, yet I couldn't pinpoint what to do. Often enough, I feel entirely at a loss for what to do with myself. I mean, what's the point? Here I am, at 19, working in perhaps the strangest and most secretive hotel ever to exist, because I really needed for there to be a point. I needed a way out of the life I'd found myself stuck in. 4 years ago, when an abusive man made me realize my only option, I had to run. I had a friend who I'd known since elementary school, who was several years older than me, lived in the US and was already engaged with a baby on the way. They were just scraping by themselves since they were both barely 20, but they knew the extent of what I was living with and offered me a hideaway. It was the end of my freshman year of high school, and I told my father about plans to visit some friends over the summer. He seemed fine with having me gone, but the weeks leading up to my departure was some of the worst. I used all the money I had left from babysitting to buy a bus ticket, which was a small sum, since that's what happens when your father borrows your money for beer, and packed my bags days before I was set to leave. The morning of my trip, my father woke me up at 6 a.m. I had to be out of the house and in the car within 5 minutes if I wanted to leave. He was not in a good mood. We drove at 90 km an hour on a street that I believe had the limit of 30 km an hour. I think we hit 140 on the highway. By 6:30, we were at the truck stop where the bus would be picking me up. Usually a 45-minute drive at least. When I got out of the car, he peeled out of the parking lot, causing bystanders to stare. It was nearly 4 hours till my bus would arrive. I had no spare money to buy food from the truck stop, nor any food with me. I sat at a picnic bench outside and waited with my single suitcase for hours. Thankfully, my phone was working, and I spent the time texting my friends to tell them I'd see them in a few weeks. Those texts changed into goodbyes later when I was across the border and safe. I got on the bus and traveled to the biggest city in the country, where I met my friend, Emily. She was a dual citizen and planned to drive me from this city to her house. We got in the car and drove, stopping at the border to identify ourselves. Being under 16, I didn't need a passport to cross, but a birth certificate. They also asked if I had permission from my parents, since my friend was obviously not old enough to be my guardian. I actually had managed to get my father to drunkenly sign a note I typed up to give myself permission to go for a few weeks. He assumed it was a school form and didn't read it. We got across and back to Emily's house in a few hours of relative peace. I was finally in a place where my father couldn't follow due to his criminal past. Money was often tight. I couldn't work because I had no social security, and no one would pay me under the table within a reasonable distance. I had no car or license and couldn't get one. Emily attended a local community college and her fiancé worked, but it was just barely enough to cover the bills and cost of her classes. The process of becoming a citizen took a while for her. She was lucky that she came here when she was older and had a better paying job before coming. Emily had a nice chunk in her savings by the time she crossed over, and it still took her over a year to become a citizen. I've been here nearly 5 years now. I'll be 20 pretty soon. We've hardly got anything saved towards paying for my citizenship, and I constantly feel guilty that I can't help get things moving. Since I've been here, they've had their first baby, and now Emily is pregnant with their third child. Since both of them are still trying to lead normal lives, I've been helping to take care of their kids and the house. Emily has managed to continue to go to school, though taking certain semesters off to care for her kids has definitely slowed down the already long process of nursing school. Her fiancé, Jeremy, has been working a steady job all this time. It pays well, but with a growing family, things can be pretty rough at times. I finished high school out here because schools don't decline you based on citizenship, apparently. I have a high school diploma from an American school. That helped me not feel so useless for my first couple of years here, but since money is too tight for me to attend college as well, I've been doing a lot of nothing for nearly 2 years. I just help around the house, spend time with Emily and Jeremy, and help with the kids. I've always wished I could do more. That's why yesterday, when I got a text from a number in the same area code as me that said that there was a way I could earn money without needing a social security number, I was more excited than wary. I assumed it was a friend who I had given my number to on Facebook while discussing my job search and didn't bother asking who I was talking to. I figured I could do just about any job that would help towards becoming a citizen, finally attending college, and becoming someone real within the world. They ended up sending me an email to contact. I didn't hesitate to send an email containing my nearly empty resume. I received a reply within minutes asking me to detail my current financial situation and my reasoning for wanting the job. I explained how I had been told that I could be hired here without a social security number and how I couldn't find anywhere else that would do so. I also told them why I needed the money and vaguely described my living situation. They seemed very kind in their reply, letting me know that they could have someone pick me up and bring me for the final interview after I filled out their application form. I quickly filled out the form that was sent to me, slightly confused by some of the questions it contained. They gave another hasty reply, seeming pleased with my application, and they offered to have an employee come pick me up at 3 that afternoon to have our final interview by 5 p.m. They gave me some details of the job they wanted me for, and I was pleased that it seemed to be simple work. $40 an hour to do housekeeping for a hotel. $10 from my pay would be taken each week for the cost of having someone from the hotel drive me to and from work. All further details would be discussed during the interview. Emily arrived home at 2 and I excitedly told her about the job offering. One of the emails told me that I should not reveal the name of the hotel that was hiring me to anyone, because they didn't want it being known that they would pay under the table. I told Emily this, and she didn't pester to know the exact details of my employment. At 3:10 p.m., a truck pulled up in front of the house, a good choice to fit into the middle of nowhere area we lived. I told Emily I'd see her later that evening, and sat outside to introduce myself to the stranger in the car. I'd never been the outgoing type, but I've been told that I'm always a really friendly person. I don't have many friends, but I've met many people, and all of those first impressions seem to have gone well. The driver introduced himself as Tyler, an employee at the hotel. He apologized for being late. He explained that he didn't drive a lot for the hotel and he'd never picked up a passenger like me. He didn't ask me many questions and didn't seem to be aware of the reason he was picking me up. "Will you be driving me every day?" I asked him to break the silence of the drive. "Every day?" he questioned back. "For work. I'm going for an interview," I told him. "Oh." The word was dragged out, as though it was dispelling whatever other reason he had thought he was escorting me to the hotel. If we're on the same shift, probably. Your house is on the way from mine. I debated asking him about what he initially thought he was escorting me for, but instead I let the car fall into another moment of silence. I've never been the best at keeping a conversation going, but his voice soon filled the vehicle again. If you get the job, I can tell you it's an experience like no other. I can't tell you much since you're not an employee yet, but Mr. Smith will go over all the details with you, I'm sure. He paused to smile at me for a moment. Any idea what position you'll be working? Housekeeping, I replied distractedly, wondering about what sort of hotel this could be to provide experiences worth talking about while being unable to talk about them. Ugh, he made a face of exaggerated displeasure. Better you than me. I couldn't clean up after strangers. I find it tedious. I shrugged. It's pretty much all I'm good at. His face was in an expression of apology when he glanced at me. I didn't mean anything bad by that. It's valid work. I smiled at him, not wanting him to worry over a comment that I honestly hadn't taken any offense with. I know. I was just saying, that's why it's a great job for me. He seemed relieved that he hadn't come off as rude, and we spent the rest of the ride cycling in between small talk and silence. It was pleasant. I felt comfortable and relatively confident about the job, meaning that I didn't really feel confident whatsoever, but I'd choke those feelings down and attempt to not let my nervousness shine through during the interview. Tyler pulled up in front of the hotel, and I was astounded that such grandeur could exist in the heavily wooded area. The forest that surrounded must have been ancient because the trees that filled it were taller than I could ever have imagined any tree could be. Somehow, the hotel looked natural among the towering foliage, as though it was meant to be in this place. It was beautiful and remote, a perfect getaway. I felt at peace as I got out the car, almost enough to ease my nerves over the rapidly upcoming interview. Tyler directed me to head into the lobby and speak to someone at the front desk while he parked the truck with the other hotel vehicles. I entered the hotel to find a lobby as immaculate as the exterior. The hotel was truly extravagant, and I could almost understand why the application featured such odd personal questions. It brought the large paycheck into perspective as well, and defeated any wariness that may have held deep within me. There was a girl with long, raven-colored hair and shocking blue eyes who stood behind the front desk. "Welcome to the Good Shade. I'm Dawn. How can I help you?" she greeted cheerfully as I arrived at the desk. I squinted for a moment at her name tag, which quite obviously did not say Dawn. That was the only opportunity I've had so far to look at her name tag, but if I recall correctly, it said HylainFae IC. I'm not sure what that means, but it didn't really look like a name tag to me, so I dismissed it as some sort of labeling the hotel has for staff. I returned her smile. "I'm here to see Mr. Smith about a position here." "Oh!" she gasped excitedly. "I knew you'd be here soon. Right this way. He's waiting for you." With a glee-filled smile, she gestured to a door behind the front desk. I wasn't sure what she was so excited about, but as I walked towards the door, I could swear she sniffed me. I found myself slightly concerned about the mental health of the girl at the front desk and wondered vaguely if people like her were the reason that the application contained such odd questions. A tall man sat behind a dark wood desk and introduced himself as Mr. Smith. He was the owner and manager of the hotel. He created all the rules and guidelines for the staff and guests, and he oversaw all that went on inside the hotel. He also personally dealt with all the applications for employment, which apparently didn't happen often. Before any conversation about the position took place, I had to sign an agreement to keep everything confidential. Honestly, I wouldn't even know that posting here was an option if I hadn't seen Tyler's post on here a while back. I've been reading the awful tales of the darkest moments in the lives of people for many years, but I never thought I'd be one of the people posting. That's besides the point, though. I have to finish detailing what I experienced last night. After signing the form, we began discussing the job. I'd be doing regular hotel housekeeping, for the most part. My job would not always be a regular one. There was the possibility of my assistance being needed with guests, or I may end up being requested by a guest for certain actions. I was fine with all of that. Some of the actions detailed deep within the contract seemed odd, but it was all well within what was worth it for the job and the money. This was the only job I could get, and it honestly didn't seem like a bad one. We arranged to have 30% of my pay deposited directly into Jeremy's account after a quick phone call with him to confirm that this was acceptable. That portion would be what I used to pay back Emily and Jeremy for housing me for free over the years. 60% would be deposited into a savings account that the hotel had provided me with. Another contract had to be signed there, but all Mr. Smith did was make a phone call in private afterwards. The final 10% would be put into a checking account that came with the savings. That was the money I planned to spend freely, whether I used it to buy clothes, groceries, or help out with the bills when things were tight at home. My savings would first be going towards citizenship, then getting a cheap place for myself. I plan to stop being a burden on my friends as soon as I can. They have a growing family and shouldn't have to deal with a nearly 20-year-old woman living off them. Once the apartment was in place and I had enough money in my savings, I'd be able to work towards college. Living on my own would have me spending a portion of my check on rent, but if I managed to keep this job, that wouldn't be an issue. The job paid more than well enough for me to finally get myself out into the world. I suppose that I should have been concerned when he asked me to confirm my genetic background. When I replied that I was fairly certain that I was 100% human, he seemed skeptical. He squinted at me for a moment, and that made me nervous. Why on earth would you question whether I'm human or not? Then things got really strange. He asked me if I would mind consenting to a blood test. I agreed, but it definitely freaked me out. I kept reminding myself that this was my only option. By the end of the meeting, I had agreed to the requirements of the job, had my blood taken, and signed what may have been a dozen forms. I also found out that my first shift had already begun, and I would be spending my night at the hotel. I called Emily from the phone in the office to let her know I wouldn't be returning until morning. I was about to leave the office when the girl from the front desk entered the room. She held out a plastic card to me, and I was shocked when I realized what it was. A debit card from a bank local to my area. It had my name on it and looked exactly like Emily's card from the same bank. Mr. Smith assured me that this was a fully functional card and that he had pulled some strings with a friend at the bank to create an account for me. As long as I was employed with the hotel, they would ensure that I would face no consequences from possessing an American account before becoming a citizen. And Mr. Smith would be glad to have his friend add my social security information once I become a citizen, so creating a new account and transferring the money would not be necessary in the future. I was beyond grateful as I left the office for the job, the bank account, and the understanding that my boss seemed to express over my confusing situation. I was told to speak to Dawn so that she could give me the items I needed to begin my shift. When I was once again facing the front desk, both Dawn and Tyler stood behind it smiling. "Did you get the job?" Tyler asked me. I smiled. "I did, actually. Mrs. Smith told me I needed to speak to Dawn before I get to start work." "That's great!" He stopped short to stare intently at the computer screen in front of him for a brief moment. "Sorry, I've been requested to a room. Are you coming, Dawn?" She shook her head. "I have to help our new friend meet with Rose, but..." She squinted at the screen for a moment. "It's just my stupid brother. You'll be fine." She rolled her eyes as she stepped away from the computer. Tyler shrugged and walked off towards several sets of elevators, and I watched as he produced a keycard and swiped it through a card reader before pressing the call button. As he got into the elevator, I looked back to Dawn, who was pulling a piece of paper from a filing cabinet. Then she walked back towards me. "Read this. Let me know if you have any questions," she stated simply. I took the paper and looked it over. Some of it brought my concern back into full force. "Welcome to housekeeping at the Good Shade. Your position is a key role in our hotel, as we are well known for how immaculately kept such a large establishment remains constantly. On request, you may be provided with a brief map of the property which explains some of the regulations about guests located in different areas of the hotel. Certain rooms require specific towels, sheets, blankets, soaps, etc. Please refer to the head of our housekeeping crew for a list of rooms and their requirements. At this point, you have already signed various contracts restricting you from speaking about any aspect of your job. This was included in the documents you signed, but we must reiterate that in case of finding items that you consider to be suspicious, dangerous, illegal, evidence in a crime, or remnants of a crime, you are not to react as you would in a normal situation. Emergency services are unable to be contacted from our establishment, nor can they enter it. We have medical staff who can deal with any wounded persons found in a room. We also have teams to deal with any persons found who may be deceased. Please refrain from touching any persons, whether they be living or deceased. This also includes any other guests and generally the other employees. If accidental contact is made at any point, please refer to the front desk for treatment of any negative side effects. Other than the items above, housekeeping here is relatively the same as everywhere else. Please remember that we take pride in immaculately clean rooms. Please refer to the head of housekeeping for concerns about anything found while working and further details about the job. Signed, A. Smith, owner and manager. I think it's hardly a question that anyone who read such a thing would be fairly concerned about what kind of hotel this truly was. I needed the money, though, and on the bright side, at least if I find a dead body, I don't have to be the one to remove it. After reviewing that sentence, I realized that my life may have hit its utter low. Once I get enough money, though, I could put all this behind me. I have a chance to quit in 3 months according to the contract, and there were consequences that I didn't want to learn about for quitting before you had worked the allotted time. This place seems to be incredibly serious about the whole secrecy thing, and I think this subreddit might be part of the reason that the employees can handle holding it in around the rest of the world. I didn't bother asking Dawn any questions at that moment. I just steeled myself for the night ahead of me. She pulled out a keycard and handed it to me with a smile. Head to floor U1 and Rose should be in the laundry room waiting for you. That's the storage floor. U1? The strange label of the floor gave me pause. She smiled as though this was a charmingly innocent question that was often brought up. Mr. Smith always forgets to tell the new employees. We actually have 50 underground floors. When we send you to a room with the label U in front of it, it's underground." I nodded. I honestly had guessed as much when I'd first heard her announce the floor that I needed to go to, but it was still a little surprising to know for a fact that this hotel had underground floors. What could have possibly motivated someone to build a hotel that had its majority of rooms below the earth? I thanked Dawn for her assistance and headed towards the elevators. There was a handwritten message on the back of the housekeeping paper that I hadn't noticed until then. It said, "Use the second elevator." I glanced back towards Dawn and she gave me a small smile and a wave before turning to type something into the computer. I arrived in front of the second elevator and I swiped the card I held through the reader as I had seen Tyler do. The call button lit up when I pressed it, and the elevator opened before me in less than a minute. I got to the correctly labeled floor and was in the laundry room too fast to calm my nerves about my first shift. There was a woman in there, maybe in her mid-20s. She was beautiful, tall and curvy, with honey blonde hair spilling down to her waist. She turned to me as I approached, and she gave me a smile that warmed her ice blue eyes. She straightened as she took in my appearance, and her sudden change in expression made it seem as though she sensed something was amiss. That expression quickly changed back, though, and she introduced herself as Rose, the head of housekeeping. For my first night, all she wanted me to do was 2 of the underground floors. Approximately 10 on each of those floors had been vacated earlier in the day and needed to be arranged for new guests. Around 20 rooms in one shift didn't sound bad. She told me which rooms needed certain things and gave me a list that carefully inventoried every item that needed to be present in each room that I cleaned. She also explained to me the hotel protocol for cleaning various things, including blood. After all of the preparation, I was finally ready to get to work. It was more than 20 rooms, but I didn't complain. I took a cleaning cart and headed off to the floor below me to begin. The floor consisted of mostly regular housekeeping tasks. I took my time, not wanting to be left with nothing to do halfway through my shift. After nearly 3 hours, I finished 12 rooms on that floor. They were all pretty basic. Each room was the same. I moved on to the next floor with around 6 hours left in the 10-hour shift. The first few rooms went simply. I made beds and restocked towels. I vacuumed, swept, mopped, and wiped things down. As I progressed down the hallway, I heard strange noises coming from occupied rooms. It ranged from crying to screaming to what seemed like some intense sexual activity. From one room, I heard what sounded like chanting in a foreign language. All the strange noises put me slightly on edge, and I tried to push through the 15 rooms on the floor I was assigned to clean. I got to the last room and found blood splatter in the shower, fresh enough to still be pooling in the tub. The sight made me a bit dizzy, and I had to take a moment to catch my breath. It freaked me out. I wasn't sure how fast blood dried, but I felt like I had narrowly missed seeing criminal activity. I cleaned out the tub using the methods Rose had described to me, and finished that room faster than any other. Or at least I thought I did. I walked out into the hallway and noticed a dried smear on the wall that hadn't been there before. Assuming it was blood, I quickly cleaned it. I wasn't about to get in trouble because a murderous guest was running rampant through the hotel. I was afraid, though. What if the person who caused this bloodshed was still nearby? I strode hastily towards the elevator with my cart in tow. I let out a breath that I didn't realize I was holding in when I met Rose back in the laundry room. "What took you so long?" she asked as I put the cart away. I was confused by the question. I still had hours left in my shift. I looked at the clock on the wall and was surprised to see that my shift had ended 30 minutes prior. Somehow, I had lost a lot of time. I explained to her what I found while cleaning, but she seemed unconcerned. She dismissed me for the day, and I went up to the lobby to find Tyler. He informed me that his shift didn't end for over an hour, but I could nap in the office on the couch while Mr. Smith was gone. I took the offer and awoke later to have Tyler escort me to the truck we had arrived in. As we got in the vehicle, I noticed his name tag, Tyler Stevens, HS. What does HS mean? Is it some sort of hotel label? I pointed towards the tag. He glanced at it and smiled. Kind of a hotel thing. They put your species on your name tag to help guests. I was surprised. HS is quite obviously Homo sapien, but what did Dawn's name tag mean? Was I truly working with people who weren't human? I didn't know how to respond with anything more intelligent than, "Oh, okay." Tyler had just started the engine when I saw Dawn come running from the hotel. She stopped at my window and gestured for me to open it, and once it was down, she handed me a small piece of metal. She told me it was my name tag, and I thanked her for delivering it. We drove away, and I found myself staring at the name tag. I wondered if I would fit in as an employee at this hotel. Perhaps, most importantly, I'm wondering if the people here can answer a question when I'm employed. A question that Tyler had no clue how to answer on the drive. A question about what their blood tests revealed, because I'm not sure why my name tag reads Isabel Lawrence, NF. The last thing Tyler said to me before he dropped me off was, "You're going to see a lot of things you've never expected, imagined, or wanted to see. If you think you've had a weird night already, you haven't seen anything yet." I had trouble going to sleep as the sun rose. I took the time to think about my life. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? How can I know when I'm not even sure if I'm human anymore? So, my dears, odds are you have also been raised human, but how sure are you that's what you really are? Leave me a comment, and let's see how many species we have listening in on this channel. If you're new here, welcome. Click on that subscribe button and that bell icon to be the first to hear of new uploads and stories. That's all I have for you this evening, my dears. Do visit me again soon. Till then, sweet dreams.